So if I were to summarize what I've been trying to do so far, I basically want to make the router do less. So the router was subscribing, it was setting the data context, and now it's not anymore, but it's still doing quite a few things. So if we look at the code, and let me find the old code. So this is the unmodified, unmigrated code, so it still has the subscriptions. It still has the data, but it also has all these filters right here. Let me increase the font size a little bit. So, well, in Iron Router, filters are things that can happen before or after a route is triggered. And I think they're called triggers in FlowRouter. But, rather than just convert Iron Router filters to FlowRouter triggers, I'm going to try and get rid of them altogether, or at least, remove them from the router. So, they're doing things like checking if the user is logged in, checking if they have the right permissions to access specific routes. Can they access the book? Can they access the full edition? Are they admins? And it's doing a bunch of other things like resetting the scroll position, tracking page views, clearing error messages. So some of these are probably dependent on the router. For example, clearing error messages, that's something that you do want to trigger on every route change, and it doesn't rely on any subscription data, right? So again, ultimately our router won't know or care about subscriptions, so right away if something does depend on subscriptions, that's a good sign it probably doesn't belong in the router. And in fact, these things, for example, can the user access the book or is the user logged in? These things do depend on the subscription, on the user subscription, and in case of the book, also on like the product subscription that contains the details for the current product the user is looking at. So anyway, even without knowing the details of how the app works, you can understand that these things probably don't belong here. Now, there's other stuff such as attach book, which actually sets this product object, which comes from a collection, i.e. a subscription, and it just sets it as a global variable on the router object itself. So it's just a way of using the router as a global data store, which is a bit weird maybe. So I decided to replace that by just using session. And maybe there's a better way to do this down the road, but for now session will do just fine. But for the other filters right here, I started running into trouble and I wasn't sure how to deal with them. And to understand the problem, let's go back to the site. So let's look at a few use cases. One of these use cases is when you access a video but you don't have the right to do that, you get this screen. So here what we're doing is basically replacing just a chunk of the page, this part, by a different screen, by a different template rather. So if the user can access the video, you show them the video. If not, you show them the upgrade dialog. But then you have this where this time I'm not logged in at all. So previously I was logged in, but I didn't have access to the video. Now I'm not logged in at all. And so first of all, you can see the URL didn't change. And that's because, well, there's two ways to do redirects. There's like real redirects where you change the URL, but there's also in-place redirects, which are probably better because they don't mess with the browser history. They don't disrupt the experience as much. So if you can, it's better, I think, to switch out the contents of the page, but keep the URL the same. So in-place redirect. So that's all well and good, but what's going on here is we're actually changing the whole layout, right? So previously, if you're just doing the no rights to access in place redirect, you keep the same header, you keep the same footer, and you just change the contents. But now we're having a different footer and a different background, a different header. The whole layout is changing, and the way we do this in Iron Router is, and let me find it, right here with this.layout. Now, okay, this works because we're at the router level, but once we switch and kind of have this logic at the template level, it starts making less sense because, well, this template will, or rather, sorry, this template, the template loaded by this route, which contains this redirect logic, it's already inside the layout. So are we going to change the layout that wraps the current template from inside the template? Well, that seems kind of weird, right? So after talking about this with Tom, well, he suggested just getting rid of, layouts in the router altogether. So let me work on this a little bit and then show you what it all looks like. So let's review what I just did. Basically, I went back to my router.js file and then I looked for this layout template option wherever I could find it, and that served as a red flag that I needed to change something. So I know this whole layout thing and how it relates to subscriptions and redirections and so on is probably a bit confusing, but hopefully as we look at actual code examples, it will start to make more sense. First of all, let's compare with the old version. So previously, our main layout template was named simply enough layout. And here's what it looked like. So it had a bunch of yields for different regions, and then a main one for the content that's going to be filled in by the current template, and then a bunch of div of CSS classes and so on. And then during the refactoring, during this process, we also added the whole subscription code for global subscriptions to layout.js. Now, what I did, as you can see here, is I changed this from layout to app. And while the subscription code is still the same, nothing changed except that it's now on the app template, the template itself is very different. So if we compare, this is the old one and the new one. Basically, everything else besides the yield and the loading thing is gone, and this template is just a loader. All it does is load your global subscriptions and then yield. Now, well, if all we did was that, we would be missing our actual divs and CSS classes, footer, header, and so on, all the things that make our layout. So that's where we bring the layout back in. But we don't use the Iron Router's layout thing, right? We don't use this anymore. That's why I commented out all these options. Instead, we'll use something pretty cool that's called templates as block helpers, which is a little known feature of Blaze, but actually really useful. So here's how it works. Let's say you have a template, in this case named force logged in. You can, write your template code, but then you have this special helper called template.contentBlock. And what happens with this is that you can use this whole template as a wrapper inside another template. So here, as you can see, this each loop is wrapped inside the force logged in template, and this part right here that I'm selecting, the inside of the block helper, will replace the template.contentBlock call. So this is a very nice way of handling layouts, right? Because that's exactly what a layout is. It's a wrapper around a template. So let's see what this looks like in practice. So instead, for example, here's the video page template. Instead of specifying the layout here, layout template, blah, 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 if we look at the video page template, we're actually explicitly wrapping the whole thing in a layout. Same thing with the interview page template, layout. Same thing with the home page, layout. And what about, well, pages that use different layouts? For example, there's this login form layout or finish sign up form layout with the big photo in the background. So that uses form page layout. There's a special layout for the starter edition, starter page layout. So maybe your reaction here is like, well, this is a step backwards because we had a nice like central way of specifying layouts in the router, and we traded that for rewriting layout in every page, every template we have. But I think this is the right call because, well, first of all, it's much clearer, right? You know right away which layout this template is going to use. And it's true, you can't really use the same template with two different layouts unless you can abstract away the inside of the template in another template that you then include. But anyway, how often do you use the same template in two different layouts, right? Usually you use the same layout for multiple templates, not the other way around. So I think that doesn't matter. So it's true, you're repeating yourself a bit more, but it's more explicit. And also it tells you right away when a template is kind of this top level page and not included from another template, which sometimes it's not obvious at all, right? So here, as you can see, I try to follow a convention where I always add the word page to the name of a template if it's a top level one, but it's not always the case. Like I forgot to do it here. On the other hand, with the layout thing, you're 100% sure. So I think this is a pretty cool pattern. I haven't used it before myself, but it really makes sense. And as we scroll through the router file, you can see I've been able to comment out all these different layout calls. So, well, the whole point of doing this was to get rid of the other filters that are around here. So let me work on that a little bit and then come back. Okay, so let's review what we were able to do thanks to our new layout system. So, as I said before, my goal was to replace this whole complicated mess of ifs and else and render and layout and so on with a much more straightforward system. So I went and looked at where this filter was used. In other words, which page required the user to be logged in this case video, interview, account, and then the admin pages are a little bit different. And what I did is I actually just followed the example of the guide. So it was mentioning having a force logged in template as blog helper or wrapper template, I guess. And that's what I did. So I created my force logged in wrapper template. If is logged in, display the content, else display the login page. And then I just wrapped the whole video template in it. Same thing with the interview template, same thing with the profile template. And I just reused the same idea for force admin. So as you can guess, this one shows an error if you're not an admin, and then I wrapped the admin purchases template, admin users, and so on. So instead of having these filters on the router, which was a problem because, well, these filters all rely on subscription data. I put everything on the template where I know that the subscription is already there because I waited for it. And the result is everything works as before. If I try to access the video page without being logged in, I get the login screen. And if I try to access the admin page without being logged in, I get this error page. So it's a little bit different to how we do things, especially if you're used to Iron Router, and even FlowRouter does have some layout management stuff. But if you check it out, it actually says, where is it? Let me search for layout, rendering layout management. FlowRouter does not handle rendering or layout management. And although it does provide a Blaze layout, this is a good clue that layout management probably doesn't belong in the router. And now it's not in there anymore.